Hello everyone. Today we start on a new and interesting aspect of sewing knit fabrics, that of making lingerie. And without doubt, the most enjoyable part of modern sewing is the ability it provides for making one's own underwear. For me, and now I hope for you too, it'll become a new and fascinating pastime. Since lingerie is done almost entirely on the sewing machine, the garments are very, very quickly completed. And it's so pleasant to work with the pretty fabrics and see something really exciting and fascinating for your efforts. Lingerie as well as swimwear really does need a modern sewing machine. It would be difficult for you ladies who still own a machine that only does a straight stitch. So if you become keen on your knit sewing, I hope at this stage you will consider getting yourself something a little bit more modern. Now, when sewing lingerie, you must remember to use a fine ballpoint sewing machine needle. As I told you earlier on the series, it's the ballpoint needle that separates the fibres of the fabric rather than destroys them. You need good sharp scissors, preferably those with serrated edges, and of course use polyester or polycotton thread. This really is a must with your lingerie. Now first you have to learn to identify the different types of fabrics. But before I go on to that, let's just take a look at some of the things that we'll be making throughout these few sessions on lingerie for sewing. For instance, here you can see a little pair of panties made with a camisole top and a matching half slip. Here you'll see a rather pretty nightgown in beautiful colours. The nice thing about lingerie is it allows you to run wild with imagination. Look around the stores and see all the things that are made in the stores and you'll get wonderful ideas. Here's a little bra with a matching pair of panties, a slip, and onto here we have a lovely selection here in different colours. You can now make colours to suit all the dresses that you're going to make. And if you find it hard to get the actual tricot fabrics I'm going to show you shortly in the stores, well, quite a lot of the underwear I make is from Philomel jersey, and that's available everywhere. So just remember the name, Philomel jersey, and you'll be able to start making your lingerie. Now let's talk about the fabrics themselves. Mostly all lingerie is made from a fabric called tricot. And at times it's difficult to identify the right and the wrong side of tricot because it can look very similar. If you don't make it up in the correct way, you may find that one side shadows differently from the other. So there are two systems that we use. First, if you pull the tricot, you will find that it rolls to the right side. So therefore, if you have a scrap of fabric and you weren't sure about it, just give it a tug and you'll know which is the right side. And after you've cut out your garment, it's a good idea to use this magic transparent tape, which doesn't mark your fabrics, and mark the cut pieces on the wrong side with a piece of transparent tape, and then you can't possibly go wrong. Now this type of tricot would be used for making, for instance, a slip like this one. And during the series, I'm going to show you how to do various lace applications, which you're going to find lots of fun. On the top of the slip, I used a special type of elastic. It is called a picot-edged lingerie elastic. It comes in all the various shades that you require for the different colours that you're going to work on. And remember, sometimes you can use contrast elastics and contrast stitching and have lots of fun and make things look quite a lot different. The thing to remember about this type of elastic is the picot edge makes it attractive. It has a smooth side and a slightly rougher texture on the other. It's the smooth side of the elastic that goes towards the body. So that's talking about tricot in a heavyweight. Now let's look at another type of tricot. This one is called a sheer tricot. And once again, if you're uncertain, it will roll to the right side when you pull it. And it is used for making up dreamy types of lingerie, very romantic gowns, all the see-through look if you like to use it. I think you'll agree that's most attractive. Now the other things that we'll use, of course, are ribbons. Here you'll see a little camisole top with knickers, which has actually been made from a combination of the slacks pattern of 305 and just using the top of number 300. So you can see by interchanging your 12 combi knit patterns all the different things you can make for yourselves. And now look here at the different things we've got, and we're going to come later on to making bras and girdles. And these require, of course, different types of fabrics. Let's look at some of the ones I have here. This one is a two-way stretch lycra. It pulls in both directions, and that is the kind of fabric used for making this particular bra. We have another kind of fabric called power net. This is even stronger, and you've got to watch that when you cut power net, that when you pull it, when you pull one direction, you'll find it forms rectangles, and the other way it forms holes. You always cut so the rectangles go around the body, but we'll be going into this at a later stage. Then, of course, you have the bonded laces that we use for our bras that don't give and add support. And you can end up making for yourself some of these types of things that you possibly never ever thought you could make on a home sewing machine. Here, for instance, is a panty girdle, and here is a girdle with a leg in it, with a special type of rubber elastic needed for around the legs. And of course, don't forget the children. Panties for the children can be made literally out of scraps. Now, there's one particular point I want to show you today about joining the lace in lingerie. It is very ugly if you join the lace down as a normal seam, so just watch what I do here. I have pinned the lace so that the actual design of the lace is matching. You see there, I've left it extended and I've lapped one over the other, matching the design itself. And then with the zigzag on my sewing machine, I start following around the design, like that. And finally, when that is done, I just cut away around the zigzag stitching, and you'll find that you have lace that is so perfectly matched you can't tell it's been joined. Now, next time, of course, we'll be moving on to different lace applications, and today we have been working on my book on page 81, and we'll be making a slip next time we meet. Hello everyone. In our last lesson we finished off where I was showing you how to attach lace by matching the design and then over sewing with a zigzag stitch around the design itself so that you didn't see an ugly seam. I'd just like to finish that off before we go on to making a slip. Having stitched it, you then cut away the excess lace following your row of stitching, and you will end up with a join in your design that you will never see when it is being worn. Of course, you'll be using a matching thread where I have to use a contrasting thread. So now let's talk about how we would make a slip, and particularly how we would attach the lace. Now, when you make a slip, you'll need to purchase a length of fabric that is just the length that you require, taking into consideration, of course, the depth of lace that you're going to use. The lace can be any depth that you like, as long as it's sufficient to go around the hemline or the top or wherever it is that you're going to use it. Lingerie fabrics are very wide, so therefore you can often get more than one garment out of one length of fabric. For sure you'll get some panties or some bras or things out of the side scraps that are left over. When you start to make a slip, you join only one side seam first, because it's much easier to attach the lace on a flat surface than when it's all joined together. So let's start and see how we actually put the lace onto the garment. Now, you place I'm going to work from the lower edge of a slip first. You place the lace along the lower edge, and rather than pin it, you use magic transparent tape like that, and you stick the lace to the garment. Now, make sure that you work on the flat surface of the table, because after all you're working on a stretchy fabric, and if you lift it as you go, then you might stretch the fabric underneath and find your lace is uneven. Now that Scotch magic tape will come off if you use a hot iron. Just hold it over and let the steam curl it up, and it will pull away eventually after you have sewn over it. And you'll find that if you use pins, they just fall out as you start to sew. So that's one good hint about lingerie. Now, having done that, you go to the sewing machine, and using a zigzag stitch you go round the upper edge of the lace. If the lace is designed with scallops, then you would follow the scalloped edge. You might say to yourself, why don't I put that lace right down on the bottom edge of my slip and save some fabric? Well, the reason is that if you put the lace right on the bottom, the stretchy part underneath could slip away and stretch as you sew. So it's much easier to put it just where you want it to be and then cut it away later on. So you'll see, if you look at this other end of the garment, I have already stitched around the top of the lace. Once again, I'm using a contrasting thread, and you can see there I've used a fairly close zigzag stitch. And having done that, the next thing to do is to take your scissors, and I like to use that rounded edge against the lace because it just doesn't stick into the lace and catch in it, and then you cut away the tricot behind the lace like that. Even here it's a little difficult for me to work, but I think you can see what I've done. Just a minute. You cut away behind the lace, and there you reveal the beauty of the lace underneath. There are times when you might prefer to leave the tricot for added strength, but we'll come to that later on when we start perhaps using panties. And now we'll turn to the point of, if you're making an opera top, how would you arrange the lace on that? Well, here we have one here, and the easiest way to do that is first cut your slip exactly as if it wasn't using lace at all, because that means if you're using narrow lace or wide lace, you're not going to make any difference to the overall finished fit of your garment. And having cut out your fabric, it's a good idea when you're doing an opera top to first pin your lace on the wrong side of the garment, because this allows you to mitre those corners as you're going around like that. So all you do is keep working around, mitring the corners as you go around the different shaped portions of the top of the garment. And when you've done that, you go to the machine and you stitch down the mitered edge. You see, like that? I've machined right across where the pins were with a zigzag stitch. And having done that, I then trim it away like that, and once again, because you'd be using a matching thread, you wouldn't see it at all. And that creates the mitre itself. Now, once that has been done, you can take your lace off completely, turn your garment to the right side, and then just go around and tape it again like I did on the bottom, and sew across the bottom of the lace and trim away the tricot from behind it. Now let's look at what you do next, because remember, at this stage you haven't joined your side seam. So take a look here. When I joined the side seam, I left that little bit of extra lace hanging at the side. The reason for that is I showed you before that when you joined your lace, it was far nicer not to take the seam right through the lace, and so at this stage you would join your side seam to the bottom point, and then you would overlap your lace like I showed you before, zigzag round the design and cut away the excess. Finally, let's look at how you would create a slip which has a slit opening. I've shown you how to do the mitered corners, and the real point I've got to make about doing a slit opening is that you never cut away underneath before you have actually made the slit. Leave the garment complete and put your lace up over the uncut garment, because if you cut it away first and try and put it round the edges, the same thing will apply. You're likely to stretch the lace. So keep it intact, and then when you've finished and you've put your lace edges together, then go round the outer edge like that, and then cut away the piece of tricot from behind. Now, I think you'll agree that it's a very simple way to make a slip. You can make a slip in probably 30 minutes to 45 minutes of your time. The straps are very simply made. All you do is take a piece of your tricot fabric, preferably cut down the length without any stretch, cut it about 12 millimetres or half an inch wide, fold it together and merely run a zigzag stitch over it, closing the edges. Next time we'll talk about different lace applications, and today, of course, we have been working on my book from page 82 to page 83. I look forward to seeing you at next lesson. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. There are many different ways of applying lace, and I hope by now you're having fun going around the stores as I suggested and looking at the different lingerie articles and saying to yourself, I could make that. In this lesson we're going to try something new. We're going to make a half slip, we're going to learn how to apply elastics and a different type of lace application. Now keep in mind that lingerie elastic is much more stretchy than ordinary elastic. so that you're going to need less to go around your waistline than you would if you were making, say, slacks or using the ordinary types of elastic that are the conventional ones that are available. For instance, you will need to cut your lingerie elastic at least 10 centimetres or 4 inches smaller than your waist measurement, perhaps even more. So I do suggest that you try it before you actually attach it to the slip. Now, once you have decided the amount that you need, you join it in a circle, and we go back, of course, to our quarter pointing method. You can see here, here's the top of a half slip, which I have divided into quarters, divided the elastic into quarters, and it's ready to be sewn on. Now, one way of sewing the elastic is merely just to pin it on the outside and sew along the bottom edge, as I'm showing you here, allowing the picot edge to be at the top and make an attractive finish. But I'm going to go to the machine in a moment and show you a different type of application for the elastic. You have to, of course, stretch the elastic as you sew, and I'm using a very small zigzag stitch, as you can see here, and stretching and sewing, and you note that I have the picot edge this time facing down into the garment itself. And once I have been round with that first row of stitching, then I shall take it out of the machine, and then I shall change the stitch on my machine. In this case, I'm going to use a large zigzag stitch, and you can use at this stage any of the fancy stitches that you might prefer on a modern sewing machine. Now, having done the first row, I'll turn it over like that, put it back into the machine, and from there on, I'm going to top stitch. And as I top stitch, I'm going to stretch and sew, and this means that you see the picot edge of the elastic above the top of the slip, and it makes a very pretty finished edge. Look at this one that I have completed here, and I think you'll agree that that's a most attractive way of finishing off the top of your elastic. You can have a choice. Now, having done the elastics, let's look at a different type of lace application. In this particular one, you're going to need to allow a little bit extra length when you're cutting your slip, because we actually start by turning up a hem like that. You can see there the raw edge of the fabric. I have turned up a hem, and then on the opposite side of the garment, which is the right side, I have taped the lace so that it extends over the raw edge of the hem underneath, and then I have taped it across the top. Then you go to the sewing machine and you zigzag around the upper edge of the lace, and you follow the design on the lower edge of the lace, and of course on the lower edge of the lace you'll be going through 3 layers of fabric, the lace and the 2 layers that you have turned up with the hem underneath. And once that has been done, this is how it will appear to you. See, there is your stitching showing how it has been done. There is the raw edge of the hem still in existence. And so finally, you cut away the lace as I have done here, and once again, as I suggest, you use the rounded edges of the scissors against the lace, and you'll find it much easier to manage. And you cut away the lace under it like that, and then you end up with a really rather attractive finish to the bottom of your slip. Here is one that has been completed. Let's have a look there. One that's been done. And here is another way, of course, of putting lace on the bottom of a half slip. In this case, we have gathered the lace. And I think you'll notice from all the things around me that you can already see how easy it is just to create your own ideas. In the next lesson, we're going to go on to panties. You can see how I've used up the scraps of lace to make up the panties, and I want you to keep that in mind, to hold on to all your scraps of lace, because this is what you can do with them. You can use them for appliques, even the smallest amounts. Here you see we've made a pair of panties with the lace running down. That's just been used up from old scraps of lace that we've had. And who would think, of course, that you could make your own slippers? Out of the scraps of your lingerie fabrics, you can make your own mules. Don't you think that's going to be fun? Now, you know what it costs to buy lingerie. You can spend hundreds of dollars on a complete outfit, yet by learning the methods that I'm showing you here, you can set to work and you can make only not your nightgowns, you can make matching negligees, just use the different combi knit patterns. You're limited only by your imagination. And when you have done all these things, we're going to move on to making girdles. Let's have a look at the girdles that are here. And of course bras. And when you consider that you can actually make 30 bras out of a metre of fabric, which costs you only a few dollars or a few pounds, you can see what you can save in making your own clothes. But when it comes to making girdles and bras and foundation garments, quite different techniques are used, the same in swimwear, because you are looking not just for the comfort of the stretch and the fabric, but you are looking for figure control as well. So therefore, the techniques that I have been showing you throughout this series really are applied very thoroughly when we move on to this stage of our knit sewing. That is why we start on the early stages, take you through the basics as we have been, and build you up so that you're understanding all the time how important the stretch factor is in relation to your body measurement and the pattern size that you're using. Now today, of course, we have been working on pages 84 and 85 of my instruction book every step of the way, which is available from fabric stores, and we have been using our pattern 309 and our lingerie pattern 311. I look forward to seeing you at our next lesson when we'll start making panties. Hello everyone. Well, as someone who's brought up a large family of children, I know the money a young mum can save by sewing for the children and how they wear out their pants. Now you can make pants for the children out of leftover scraps of the things that you've been making for yourself. And just so you'll understand a very good fabric that you can use, it's called polycotton. This is a mixture of cotton and polyester. It's available in most fabric stores and it's ideal for children's panties and also for their pyjamas and the other things that they wear most of the time because it's very, very durable. Today we're going to make a pair making tricot and lace, but before we go on to how panties are constructed, I'd just like to show you how a simple trim can be put around the edge of your underwear, or even perhaps your daytime dresses around the edges of your sleeves. Just watch what I do here on the machine. You see, I have just a raw edge of fabric, and I've put it under the foot on the machine. I have a very small zigzag stitch, and I am going to pull it madly. Absolutely madly, extend it to its full extent as I sew. So if you just watch, you'll see how it works. Stretching as hard as I possibly can, and see what happens? It comes out with a pretty fluted edge. So do try that sometime. You'll find it such a quick and easy way to finish off a hemline. So now back to the panties that we're going to make today. I'll just take this out because I'll be doing a little bit of sewing later on. Now, when you start to make panties, there are one or two things that you need to know. Firstly, I've been telling you, save your scraps and you can use them for decorations. You see in this case here, I have just used a little motif and sewn it on and cut away from the back as I've been showing you before. That is on the front of the panties. What you have to remember is that on the back of the panties, you must never put lace going across unless you gather it. For a very good reason. When you sit down, it's going to crack and break up, isn't it? So here you see some panties rather like we're going to make today, lace on the front, in this case nothing on the back, and the same way with this one here. But look at this one. On the back of it, loads of gathered lace, and that won't be a problem. So keep that in mind. Keep your lace in a direction that's not going to crack as you wear them. Now, having started on the back of the trousers, the next thing to do is to attach the crotch sections. There are two pieces in your pattern, and you can see the way I have done that. One is the lining. You can use self fabric, but a lot of people actually prefer to use a cotton fabric for the lining itself. And I encased the back section of the trousers between the two layers of fabric, and I sewed it across with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam. And then once I had done that, I trimmed it down to 1/8 or 3mm. Now the reason for that is, if you sew stretch fabrics very close to the edge, they're likely to buckle and twist. So it's far better to use a slightly bigger seam, and then when you've finished, trim it down as I have done there. And once that has been done, you're ready to attach the crotch to the other section of the panties. And this is perhaps just a little bit more tricky. But if you have any doubts, because you see we're trying to encase those seams so we don't see them when they're finished. If you have any doubts about the way to do it, just note what I have done. I have pinned the other side of the crotch section in its finished position. And having done that, I won't have a problem, because all I do is turn it over like that and pin it. You see, I am going to sew that seam from the inside across like that. So having pinned it, I would go to the machine and then stitch it across like I did before on the back section. And finally, I won't keep going because I do run out of time, I would trim that seam down as I showed you, like that. And let's look at a pair that I have already done. The crotch section then is neatly encased inside without showing any seam allowances at all. Now when you have reached that stage, of course you have to start and put the elastics on. They won't present a problem to you now because I've shown you so often, quarter point the top, quarter point your elastic, and it's ready to be attached by stretching the elastic to fit the top, keeping the elastic on top as you sew. Here is a pair that I have already done. There is the little lace motif on front, your elastic attached to the waist. Now let's talk about how we'll put it on the legs. There is a little difference. When you sew elastic to the legs of panties, you do not stretch it across the front of the leg, you put all the stretch at the back of the leg. So therefore you would start sewing at the side seam and just keep your elastic smoothly across the front, but when you get to the back section, then you stretch and sew. This makes sure that when you wear the panties, they are comfortable in the front and don't cut into your leg at all. I hope you will really start on making these panties because they take very, very little time. And keep in mind a few different ideas I've got to show you here. But these are tennis panties, but there's a particularly good idea for children's panties to use the rib trim that we started off originally when we made a knit top, because that's very comfortable around the legs of children and the baby's panties. And of course in your patterns you'll find other designs if you like the short bikini panties, and of course you use exactly the same techniques. Now throughout the series we've been using of course our set of combi knit patterns. Remember them, 300 was our tops with our collars and sleeves, and the same of course for the men. We had the children's, and for goodness sake, what children's pattern have you got whereby you can actually make from birth to 12 years on one pattern? We have the children's nighttime and tracksuits, skirts, slacks and jeans, unisex jeans for the men as well as the ladies, jackets and tops, the dolman sleeves, the combi knit dresses, your swimwear and your leotards for all the family, your tracksuits and your underwear pattern. And today we have been working on page 87 of our book. I hope you've enjoyed making lingerie, and next time we meet we'll go further into the techniques of knit sewing. Hello everyone. I hope you're finding that making lingerie is not only a rewarding hobby, but a very relaxing one. And today we go a step further and we're going to start learning to make foundation garments. And I hope you'll be as excited as I was when I made my very first bra. But before we move on to that, let's take a look at what I made out of 3 meters of tricot. When I go into a shop to buy a complete set, it's an almost impossibility. Certainly you don't get a bra and girdle that matches your undies. When you make it for yourself, these are the things you can do. Let's take a look at what I've brought here today. First we have a girdle, and then a bra. Here we have a nightgown, a petticoat, a pair of panties, a negligee, And out of the scraps, you can make yourself your little shower caps, little dolly bags, and perhaps little slippers and things to match. It makes really ideal gifts. Now, the things that we need to make a bra are these. We need the special types of elastics. This is the Pico Edge elastic that we have been using throughout the lingerie series. And we require a special type of elastic to make the shoulder straps. Along with this, of course, you're going to need the special little adjuster clips and rings to attach to the shoulder